a guy that is able to express himself so purely.
He played his horn sometimes 12 to 14 hours a day. He'd been smoking reefers and drinking for a number of years.
You go out to his grave, you can't find it. There's no proper marker at that cemetery.
Duke Ellington's trumpet soloist Cootie Williams once called Charlie Bird Parker the greatest individual musician that ever lived. And in the entire history of jazz, no one had ever influenced every single instrument the way Bird did. But here's where it gets complicated. While he was out there reshaping music forever, his own life was completely falling apart. The same intensity that made him a musical genius also made it impossible for him to hold his life together. So what exactly did Bird do to leave that kind of mark on music? And how did he do it all before dying at just 34 years old? To really understand that, we need to start at the beginning. Charlie Parker was born on August 29, 1920, in Kansas. Music was already part of his world, as his father, Charles Parker, worked as a stage entertainer, while his mother, Adelaide Bailey, held down night shifts at the local Western Union office. When Charlie was 7, his family moved to Kansas City, Missouri, and that change would prove life-defining. Kansas City was buzzing with sound at the time, a hotspot for African-American music, where jazz, blues, and gospel poured out of clubs and churches alike. Growing up in the middle of that scene left a deep mark on him. Parker's musical journey began in public school, where he first discovered his talent. He picked up the saxophone at just 11 years old. And by 14, he was already playing in the Lincoln High School Band, under the guidance of band leader Alonzo Lewis. And with a brand new alto saxophone his mother bought him, his skills started to grow quickly. Even as a teenager, Parker spent far more time in local clubs than in classrooms, sitting in with bands whenever he could. Music wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was his whole world. By 1935, completely devoted to the saxophone, he made a bold decision. He dropped out of school to chase a full-time career in music. And after that, Parker threw himself completely into music. Night after night, he played with local bands in Kansas City's jazz clubs, eagerly jumping into jam sessions with more seasoned musicians and constantly pushing himself to get better. One of those sessions in early 1936 became infamous. While jamming with the Count Basie Orchestra, Parker lost his place in the chord changes during a solo. Drummer Joe Jones, clearly unimpressed, hurled a cymbal at Parker's feet, a blunt signal to get off the stage. The moment was humiliating. Parker had been called out in front of some of the city's best musicians, and he was furious. But instead of quitting, he locked onto a single burning thought: I'm going to show these cats. That embarrassment became fuel. Parker committed himself to practicing harder than ever before, spending the next 3 to 4 years working 10 to 12 hours a day. Even as his dedication intensified, his personal life moved quickly too. At just 16 years old, he married Rebecca Ruffin on July 25th, 1936. Later that same year, Parker traveled with a Kansas City band to the Ozarks for the opening of Musser's Resort. On the way, disaster struck. Their caravan was involved in a serious car accident that left Parker with 3 broken ribs and a fractured spine. Even injuries that severe couldn't slow him down for long. By 1937, he had settled in the area and fully committed himself to woodshedding. Long, relentless practice sessions focused on shaping his sound. Working closely with a pianist and a guitarist, Parker drilled improvisation over complex chord changes, gradually developing the ability to move effortlessly through solos that flowed across chords and scales. All that work began to pay off. In 1938, Parker joined pianist Jay McShann's Territory Band. His first gig came in the summer or early fall at the Continental Club in Kansas City, where he filled in as a substitute alto saxophonist for Edward Hale. Just a few months later, in December, Parker took another step forward by joining Harlan Leonard's Rockets. The band played dances all around the city, including a Christmas event where a local newspaper even listed Parker as part of the Rockets lineup, an early sign that his name was beginning to carry weight. In 1939, Parker made a bold break. He said goodbye to Rebecca and the people closest to him, packed his bags, and headed to New York City to chase his musical dreams. Life there wasn't easy, and to get by, he took on part-time jobs wherever he could find them. One job, though, proved especially important. Parker washed dishes for $9 a week at Jimmy's Chicken Shack, a club where the legendary pianist Art Tatum performed regularly. Just being in that room, night after night, absorbing Tatum's brilliance, pushed Parker to think differently about music. It was in New York that Parker experienced his his real musical breakthrough. He began shaping a radically new approach to improvisation, one that would eventually be known as bebop. A key moment came during a practice session on the tune Cherokee with guitarist William Fleet. As he worked through the song, Parker realized that the 12 semitones of the chromatic scale could be used to move melodically into any key. That insight shattered the limits of the simpler, more traditional solo patterns he'd been relying on and opened up an entirely new musical path. Looking back, Parker explained that he had grown frustrated with the predictable chord patterns most jazz musicians relied on at the time. He felt there was something more expressive and exciting out there, and that he could hear it in his head, but for a long time he couldn't figure out how to play it. That breakthrough came while working on Cherokee. By focusing on the upper notes of chords and connecting them using the full chromatic scale, Parker realized he could move freely between keys and create melodies that flowed naturally over complex harmonies. In that moment, the sound he'd been imagining finally became playable. It was a turning point that made him feel fully alive as a musician and set him on the path toward a completely new style of jazz. In 1940, Parker returned to Kansas, both to perform again with Jay McShann and to attend his father's funeral. That summer, he played extensively with McShann's band, and during this period, he made his first professional recordings, a major milestone in his early career. By 1942, Parker was ready to move on. He left McShann's band and spent the next year performing with Earl Hines, the influential jazz pianist and band leader. Parker later reflected that his time with Hines helped him shape a unique sound, blending the strong, driving Midwestern beat he grew up with and the faster, sharper tempos he had absorbed in New York. Around the same time, Parker began focusing more seriously on composition. His growing friendship with Dizzy Gillespie played a key role in that shift. Gillespie would often write down Parker's improvised solos and turn them into fully formed melodies. Eventually, Parker left Hines's band, and together they formed a small group with pianist Al Haig, bassist Curly Russell, and drummer Stan Levy. What set this group apart was how unconventional it was for the era. It was racially integrated and didn't rely on a guitarist for rhythmic support, an unusual choice at the time. That stripped-down setup gave the soloist far more harmonic and rhythmic freedom. By late 1944, the group secured a residency at the Three Deuces in New York. Their sound didn't just turn heads, it stirred things up. For the first time, people started calling this new music bebop. Musicians from other clubs showed up just to hear what was going on. Some were excited, others weren't so sure. As bassist Charles Mingus later pointed out, many players felt threatened. Bebop challenged the rules of jazz they had spent years mastering, and not everyone was ready for that. When the recording ban was lifted in 1945, bebop truly broke loose. Parker's work with Dizzy Gillespie, Max Roach, and others hit the jazz world like a shockwave. Small group gigs around New York made it clear that something new had arrived, and word spread fast. Musicians and fans alike buzzed about this sharp, fast, unpredictable sound. That November, Parker led a now legendary Savoy recording session under the name Charlie Parker's Reboppers, with Gillespie and a young Miles Davis on trumpet, Curly Russell on bass, and Max Roach on drums. He recorded Coco, Billy's Bounce, and Now's the Time. These tracks didn't just make waves, they became blueprints for modern jazz. In December, the band headed west to Billy Berg's club in Los Angeles. The engagement was a disaster. Most of the group packed up and went home, but Parker stayed behind. He sold his return ticket to buy heroin and even named a tune after his dealer, Moose the Mooch. When Moose was arrested and the supply dried up, Parker leaned heavily on alcohol instead. Things spiraled fast. After a dial recording session in July 1946, he completely unraveled, setting fire to his hotel room and running naked through the lobby. The police jailed him briefly, then sent him to Camarillo State Mental Hospital, where he stayed for 6 months. Parker left Camarillo healthier and, for a short time, clean. Before leaving California, he recorded Relaxin' at Camarillo, along with other tracks with pianist Errol Garner's trio and vocalist Earl Coleman. When he returned to New York in 1947, the heroin came back. So did the music. He recorded dozens of classic sides for Savoy and Dial, with a new quintet featuring Miles Davis and Max Roach. There was constant tension over pianists Bud Powell, John Lewis, and Duke Jordan all rotated through, but Parker tried to strike a balance between maintaining control and mentoring the younger musicians around him. With his reputation firmly established, Parker partnered with producer Norman Granz at Mercury and became a regular feature of the jazz at the Philharmonic concerts. That That collaboration took him to Carnegie Hall, into recordings with Latin band leader Machito, and finally into the studio with strings, something Parker had long dreamed of as a devoted fan of classical music. In 1949, that dream became reality with Charlie Parker with Strings. The ballads, including Just Friends and April in Paris, revealed a softer, more lyrical side of Bird and introduced him to an even wider audience. The early 1950s brought more milestones. Parker recorded Bird and Diz with Gillespie and Thelonious Monk, toured Europe, and packed New York clubs night after night. Still, racism in the music industry left him increasingly frustrated, even as his influence continued to grow. In 1953, Parker stepped onto the stage at Toronto's Massey Hall alongside Dizzy Gillespie, Charles Mingus, Bud Powell, and Max Roach, one of the most legendary lineups jazz had ever seen. Playing a plastic Grafton alto saxophone, he delivered a performance that still lives on through live and bootleg recordings. Even as his personal life was coming apart, Bird kept pushing the music forward, right to the edge. By the early 1950s, Parker was living in New York with Chan Berg, whom he treated as his wife. Together, they had 2 children, Baird and Little Pre, despite the fact that he was still legally married to his previous wife, Doris. His life, like his music, was tangled and intense. Then tragedy struck. In 1954, Little Pre died from pneumonia, and the loss crushed Parker. Not long after being fired from Birdland, he attempted to take his own life and was hospitalized. For a brief moment in early 1955, it seemed like he might recover, but his health soon began to fail again. Parker's final appearance at Birdland came on March 4, 1955, and it ended in chaos. After an argument with Bud Powell, who refused to play, Parker, drinking heavily, walked off and retreated to the suite of his close friend and patron, Baroness Panonica, at the Stanhope Hotel. He refused medical treatment, and just over a week later, on March 12th, he died there while watching television. He was only 34 years old, though the coroner estimated his body looked more like that of a man in his 50s or 60s. What followed was confusion and conflict. Disputes over dates, his age, and his complicated personal life led to family arguments, a funeral Parker likely wouldn't have wanted, and even disagreements over where he should be laid to rest back in Missouri. Charlie Parker burned bright and burned out at just 34. But his music never stopped. Listen closely and you can still hear a man turning pain into possibility, transforming struggle into sound, reshaping jazz one chorus at a time, even today. If you enjoyed this story and want more stories about the lives and music of legends like Bird, don't forget to subscribe. There's plenty more to listen to.